Well, thank you, Cadest, and welcome everyone to the 14th Annual Grand Challenges meeting. This isn't our typical Grand Challenge event. Tonight we also have the 10th anniversary of the World Health Summit, so it's really a fantastic combination. We're also honored that some of the world's most important leaders in the fight against global poverty and disease are here too. Dr. General Tedros of the WHO, Prime Minister Solberg of Norway, and Chancellor Merkel have all joined us. It's appropriate that we're holding this meeting in Germany. Grand Challenges is about identifying the most important unsolved problems and then soliciting the best ideas to solve them. Actually, that is originally a German idea. When we started the Grand Challenges program 15 years ago, we based it on the work of a German mathematician, David Hilbert. Hilbert is probably most famous for the speech he gave at a Paris mathematics conference in 1900. There, he encouraged his fellow mathematicians to tackle a list of 23 problems that had never been solved. Hilbert was not optimistic that all these problems would be solved in short order. For example, his list included proving the Riemann hypothesis, which has to do with the distribution of prime numbers. Hilbert had once told his students, "If I were to awake after having slept for 1,000 years, my first question would be, has the Riemann hypothesis been proven?" It's worth asking, how has his prediction panned out? Well, Hilbert's only been gone for 75 years, not 1,000, but it looks like his instincts were right. Although many people have attempted a proof, there's still no verified proof of that Riemann hypothesis. Then again, 20 of the other 22 problems have been solved. So importantly, the challenges he laid out really stimulated people to work hard to create new fields, and even quantum mechanics came out of the challenge that he put forward, which would have been hard to predict. And this is why we based our grand challenges on that approach that Hilbert took. And it's also why I'm passionate about the broad process of innovation. It's not because we always succeed, but when we do, we can often do even better than the best case scenario when we look at what's going to happen in the future. This is especially true in the fight against global poverty and disease. And tonight I'm going to share some examples, 3 stories that suggest scientific progress that will make a huge difference for global health. The first story is a very interesting one. It's about the antibiotic azithromycin. A team of researchers at a Croatian pharmaceutical company discovered it back in 1980. And the first thing it was used for was treating an eye infection, trachoma, at that time the leading cause of blindness. I'm not sure what that team had in mind when they started that research, but just the trachoma work alone ended up saving millions of people's eyesight. So this was a phenomenally successful drug, and it got out very, very broadly. But that's not the end of the story. Over the years, as that trachoma was being given out as part of a campaign, people saw that it seemed to have beneficial effects even beyond trachoma. The overall death rate from all sorts of causes seemed to go down in those areas that had had the azithromycin coverage compared to areas that hadn't had that coverage. And so starting in 2015, our foundation designed a trial to go out and really test that hypothesis. It lasted for 3 years. We had health workers in Niger, Malawi, and Tanzania distribute either azithromycin or a placebo. So this was completely blind. The people distributing it didn't know which one it was, and it got out to 200,000 children in high mortality areas. These were not areas that there was still trachoma. This was focused on the overall health of those children. And amazingly, azithromycin reduced deaths by an average of 13% in children under 5 years, and by 25% in infants between 1 and 5 months old. That's a very significant effect for a drug that's been off patent and is a super inexpensive intervention. And, of course, with child mortality, that's, the greatest statistic in global health that I never tire of repeating. Hopefully, some of you have heard it from me dozens of times, that we've cut child mortality in half since 1990. So we've gone from 11 million a year to now less than 5 million. But it's pretty incredible that azithromycin, given just a few times a year to these young children, could help us cut that number significantly. So now we're working with partners on how to best deliver this drug in poor countries. We may give it as part of the vaccination schedule. We may give it to their mothers during pregnancy, in fact. That's another sidearm of the trial that we're trying out right now. And the WHO is working with us to come up with the guidelines for how it should get used so that we, even starting next year, can get out there and start to save literally hundreds of thousands of additional lives. So it goes to show that innovation comes in many forms. It doesn't always mean inventing something totally new. Sometimes the older drugs still have new tricks. And if we keep the needs of the poorest in mind in our work, we can help many more people than initially expected. Another element of this research, of course, is figuring out why azithromycin has such a positive effect. And that gets us into the whole field of studying the microbiome and how some kids have microbiomes that are very associated with good health, and many kids have microbiomes that are associated with inflammation, and they don't do as well. And so not only is azithromycin a good tool, it'll help us with a broader understanding and more interventions to help with childhood health by intervening to make the microbiome better, which is almost certainly the mechanism that we're seeing this benefit from. Let me move on now to a second story, and this is about mosquito-borne illnesses. I did a quiz on my website about asking people on the internet what animal kills the most humans. And people guessed hippopotamus and lion, and some people were clever. They guessed humans kill more humans than any other animal. And that is true. That is second place. But in years where we don't have large-scale war, in fact, mosquitoes are number one. So mosquito-borne illnesses, particularly malaria, still a huge problem. Even though we've cut the deaths in half, we still have over 400,000 deaths a year. Now our goal, which is a very ambitious one and will not be achieved without breakthrough new tools, is to eliminate malaria by 2040. In fact, in the last few years, for a variety of reasons, including insecticide and drug resistance, malaria deaths have actually ticked up a bit, as well as the number of cases. So we still have a lot of work to do. This is not going to be easy. But there's a new technology, in fact, quite a few technologies that have to do with killing mosquitoes or changing the mosquitoes so they can't transmit this disease. And the most advanced form of this is called gene drive. Gene drive was discussed quite a bit, but it wasn't until the discovery of CRISPR that it became very clear that a construct like this could be created. And just last month, some researchers from the consortium Target Malaria published studies where they showed that with the right construct, they were able to completely collapse the mosquito population that spreads malaria. Now, to be clear, we're still at an early stage. This was in a laboratory. It was only 600 mosquitoes, but it looks like this is going to be a very promising tool. Another mosquito-borne disease is dengue fever. It's a different species of mosquitoes, the Aedes aegypti, famous because they also spread yellow fever, Zika, chikungunya, and so they're a real problem. The scientific community's had a tough time with a vaccine. There is a vaccine, but it's very challenging to get right. A scientist named Scott O'Neill had a different idea. What if instead of vaccinating the people, we did something to the mosquitoes? And what he saw was that a lot of insects have a bacteria that they carry along with them, a symbiont called Wolbachia. And he wanted to explore what would happen if he put Wolbachia into the Aedes, because in natural conditions they don't have that. So one of our early grand challenge funding things was backing Scott in doing this work. And what he saw is that with the right flavor of Wolbachia, he made it impossible for the Aedes to transmit dengue. Now, he saw that in the laboratory. Today, there actually are large field studies in places like Yogyakarta, Indonesia, where half the city has these Wolbachia-treated Aedes mosquitoes and half does not. We won't know the results till 2019, but the results are looking very promising. In fact, home prices are going up in the half of the city where we're using Wolbachia, and they're going down in the other parts. So that hopefully is a positive indication that when we unblind the study, that it will be a success. My third and last story is about vaccines, and tuberculosis has been one of the toughest targets. BCG is a widely licensed vaccine, but it's not fully effective, particularly protecting pulmonary disease in adults. Last month, however, we had a report from a new TB vaccine called M72 that showed quite substantial efficacy. And the whole world of inventing new vaccines, including ones like this, is moving a lot faster than ever before. And so that's promising in general, not just for the specific vaccine, but for the whole field. A good example of that agility is the work we're doing with CureVac here in Germany. It's a biotech company, and it's developing vaccines that can be changed very easily because they're based on mRNA, and so they're getting the body to generate the proteins in a very, very efficient way. Those CureVac vaccines, the new ones, are being studied in animals, and they will be going into humans very soon, so we're very hopeful about that. TB, of course, was discovered back in the 1880s by Robert Koch here in Germany, and he hoped that there would be some type of cure, some type of drugs or vaccine, and a long time has gone by, but finally it looks like there is definitely some hope there that could make a huge difference. Now, scientists have been encouraged to create new vaccines, partly because now we have the funding that whenever we discover a new vaccine, the poorest kids in the world get those vaccines because of funding from Gavi. The two leaders we have here, Chancellor Merkel and Prime Minister Solberg, have been two of the strongest in terms of helping Gavi make sure it's got all the resources it needs. So my final point is that we need leaders in government and we need leaders in science. The policymakers here, I hope you recognize that the tools we have today are not enough to face the challenges we have. In fact, we can go backwards as we develop resistance, as the bugs and insects develop resistance to those tools. But I'm very optimistic about the innovative process. Innovation is really key to achieving the SDG 3 action plan. So the work of innovation is more critical than ever. We need more leaders like Prime Minister Solberg and Chancellor Merkel, that have an optimism, that see the world stepping out and continuing to help each other, which in a lot of cases we see counter-trends to that, but I hope we'll overcome that. In fact, being here in Germany is great because they've continued to increase their role in development aid. They're increasing their funding for research. We opened our second European office yesterday here because of the chance for those partnerships. I've told you about some great scientific research tonight, but it is still just research. Whether it remains that way or leaves the lab and helps people out in the world is a function of how we as leaders step up to support this science. I hope that we will. Thank you.